The millionaire forced his son to marry a lowly waitress as punishment, yet he was stunned by what his son did. Welcome to 30 Millionaire Stories. Have you ever thought a forced decision could unlock a door to love, redemption, and an entirely new life? Today's story begins with a cold ultimatum in a lavish Boston office, but ends in a romantic moment under a sunset, where two hearts find each other amid painful secrets. If you believe that sometimes the harshest challenges lead to true happiness, hit that like button, subscribe to 30 Millionaire Stories, and stay with us until the very end. Don't blink, because this story will make you believe in the power of change. In the opulent office overlooking Boston Harbor, Victor Langley sits behind a grand ebony desk, its polished surface reflecting the crystal chandelier's glow. His sharp gaze fixes on the window, where city lights flicker across the water. A real estate tycoon and single father, Victor built Langley Holdings from nothing. Every contract, every plot of land, bearing the mark of his relentless drive. But today, his mind isn't on billion-dollar projects or skyscrapers. It's consumed by Julian, his 29-year-old son, whose life drifts through lavish parties, expensive supercars, and fleeting relationships that leave nothing but emptiness. Victor sighs, his eyes resting on a family portrait on the wall. Julian, as a boy, beaming beside his long-deceased mother. That child, with hopeful eyes, is gone, replaced by a man Victor barely recognizes. The office door opens softly, and Lawrence, the loyal butler, steps in. "Sir, Master Julian has just returned from Los Angeles," he says, his voice even, respectful. Victor nods, his gaze still on the window. "Send him in," he replies, his tone low, carrying the weight of a man accustomed to command. Julian appears, his tailored suit fitting perfectly, hair neatly styled, but his eyes are detached, as if everything in the room is a mere inconvenience. Victor gestures to the leather chair across the desk. Julian sits, crossing his arms, raising an eyebrow, a gesture both careless and defiant. Victor wastes no time, no pleasantries needed. "You're throwing your life away," he says, his voice cold as steel, sharp and unyielding. "Millions squandered on nonsense, treating people like garbage. It's time to stop." Julian smirks, the sound brief and dry, as if his father's words are a joke not worth hearing. But Victor doesn't flinch. He leans forward, hands clasped tightly on the desk, his eyes locking onto his son's, giving no room for evasion. "You will marry," he declares, his voice steady but heavy with finality. "A waitress named Elise, from Harbor Grill." Julian freezes, the smirk on his lips stiffening, then erupting into an incredulous laugh. "A waitress? Are you serious?" he asks, his tone blending shock and mockery. Victor nods, unwavering. "Marry her, or lose everything, your wealth, your inheritance, everything." His words land like a clean cut, clear, uncompromising. Julian leaps to his feet, face flushed, hands clenched. "What kind of game is this?" he nearly shouts, his voice trembling with rage. But Victor's gaze doesn't waver, not a flicker of excess emotion. "You have 1 week," he says, his tone calm to a chilling degree. "Refuse, and you'll be on your own, not a cent to your name." The room sinks into a heavy silence, as if the air itself has been drained. Julian paces, his steps frantic on the Persian rug, one hand raking through his hair, his mind reeling. Elise? A waitress? The idea is absurd, almost insane. He's never met her, never heard her name, yet his father issues an ultimatum as if it's a given. But Victor's voice echoes in his head, cold and unyielding. "I've arranged it. She's agreed." Julian stops, turning to face his father, a sense of betrayal surging in his chest. This isn't just a request, not just an ultimatum. It's a trap, laid with the precision only Victor Langley, who built an empire on strategy, could devise. His eyes meet his father's, searching for a hint of jest, a crack to resist, but finding only absolute resolve. Victor sits there, motionless, like a stone statue, the window's light casting sharp lines across his rigid features. Julian's fists tighten, his breathing quickens, but he says no more. The room remains silent, but it's the silence before a storm, where everything could shatter. Victor's gaze never leaves his son, his eyes seeming to say time is slipping, and Julian's choices are few. The wedding day arrives like a gust of wind, sweeping everything in an unstoppable rush. In the vast bedroom of the Langley mansion, Julian stands before a large mirror, adjusting his silk tie with mechanical motions. His tailored suit fits perfectly, but his eyes are empty, as if the man who once controlled every facet of his life is now a puppet in his father's preordained plan. The Langley estate transforms into a lavish venue, with fresh flowers lining the paths, chandeliers glittering, and tables draped in white silk. But no joy fills the air, only a cold tension, like a business deal cloaked in opulent veneer. In a small room at the back of the mansion, Elise sits on a velvet chair, clutching a bouquet of white carnations. Her slender fingers tremble slightly, betraying the unease she tries to hide. The simple white wedding dress hugs her delicate frame, understated, like her very essence. Elise isn't here for love or romantic dreams. She's here for her mother, battling illness, needing funds for costly treatments. This marriage is her sacrifice, a deal to secure her family's financial stability. The door creaks open, and her mother, leaning on a cane, steps in, her wrinkled face etched with worry. "Are you sure, Elise?" she asks, her voice quivering. Elise looks up, forcing a strained smile, striving for calm. "It's the only way, Mom," she replies, her voice soft but resolute, as if convincing herself. The ceremony unfolds swiftly, almost mechanically. Julian stands at the altar, his posture rigid in his black suit, his eyes avoiding Elise as she glides down the aisle, her dress whispering across the marble floor. The vows are recited, cold, like a memorized script, devoid of emotion. When the priest declares them husband and wife, Julian leans in, his lips brushing near her cheek, but he pulls back quickly, as if even the slightest touch is too much. The guests, clad in high society attire, clap politely, but the applause lacks life, sounding more like duty than joy. At the reception, the air remains heavy. Julian stands in a corner, sipping red wine, his gaze distant, lost in his own world. Elise, in her wedding dress now seeming out of place amid the unfamiliar crowd, moves among the guests, maintaining a forced smile. She avoids Julian's eyes, keeping her distance, as if both understand the other's presence is a reminder of this arrangement. The night drags on, and Julian can't endure the stifling air of the wedding reception. He slips away from the banquet hall, stepping into the garden behind the mansion. The cool night air carries the faint scent of jasmine on the breeze. Stars twinkle above, and the garden's stillness feels like the only place he can breathe. He stands there, inhaling deeply, trying to grasp what his life has become. A man who once had everything, wealth, power, freedom, now bound by an ultimatum and an unwanted marriage. Soft footsteps crunch on the gravel path, breaking the silence. Elise appears, her bouquet still in hand, her white wedding dress shimmering under the moonlight. Her eyes are gentle but hold a deep sadness, like a mystery Julian never considered unraveling. She stops, a few steps away, saying nothing, just standing there, waiting, as if she too seeks an answer in the darkness. The space between them is silent, but it's a heavy silence, where both feel the other's presence without words. Julian looks at Elise, truly seeing her for the first time, not as a piece of his father's plan, but as a person with her own story. She doesn't move, doesn't approach, just stands there, her eyes reflecting the moonlight, carrying a quiet resilience. The garden, with its trees swaying gently in the wind, feels like the only place they can face each other, if only for a moment, before returning to the reality of a marriage built on terms rather than love. The first months of Julian and Elise's marriage are a silent war, wordless but brimming with tension. Julian lives like a bachelor, avoiding Elise with lavish parties, stretching into dawn and late-night business trips he deliberately extends. Their rare encounters in the sprawling mansion are brief, cold, and laden with unspoken resentment. Elise, though trying to bridge the gap, meets only Julian's indifference. Each attempt, a morning greeting, a question about his day, is met with curt replies or averted eyes. She gradually retreats, finding solace in her work at Harbor Grill, where she feels purpose, control, and herself, if only for a few hours each day. One morning, Julian stumbles home after a night of partying, disheveled. His white shirt is crumpled, buttons undone, eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep and liquor. He enters the kitchen, where Elise prepares breakfast, the scent of frying eggs lingering in the air. Julian leans against the counter, weary, muttering a barely audible "hi." Elise looks up from the pan, her gaze briefly resting on him, but carrying no warmth. "I have to get to work," she replies, her voice even, not inviting further talk. Julian nods, but his eyes have already drifted, not truly seeing her. His phone buzzes in his pocket, and like a reflex, he pulls it out, fingers swiping the screen, leaving the kitchen without another word. Elise sighs, flipping the egg in the pan, her eyes heavy with an unnamed sadness. She once hoped time would soften Julian's coldness, would help them find common ground, but he remains a tall, icy wall, impossible to scale. One evening, Elise sits on the living room couch, a book open on her lap, but her eyes wander beyond the pages. The soft glow from the table lamp bathes her in warm light, yet it doesn't dispel her loneliness. The front door opens, and Julian, unusually, returns earlier than usual. He steps in, still in his suit, tie loosened, looking tired but alert. Elise looks at him, and this time, she can't suppress the frustration that's simmered too long. "Are you planning to stay longer than 5 minutes?" she asks, her voice tinged with biting sarcasm. Julian pauses, eyebrow raised, his gaze sweeping over her, a mix of surprise and irritation. Elise sets the book on the table, her movement sharp, her eyes locking onto his. "We're married, Julian," she says, her voice sharper. "But you act like I don't exist." Julian smirks, the sound dry and harsh, as if she's said something absurd. "Married?" he retorts, his tone laced with mockery. "This isn't a real marriage, you know that." His words cut, cold and unforgiving, a reminder to both of this marriage's nature. A deal, nothing more. Elise stands, her slender frame steady, her eyes unwavering. "I know this wasn't your choice," she says, her voice slow but firm. "But it wasn't mine either. We're stuck in this. Julian, but you could try to make it less painful. For both of us." Julian shakes his head, his eyes darkening, as if her words are an annoyance not worth answering. He brushes past her, not looking back, disappearing into the hallway toward his room. The door shuts behind him, leaving Elise alone in the vast living room. She clenches her fists, a smoldering disappointment burning in her chest, like a fire that can't fully ignite. She looks toward where Julian went, her eyes holding a flicker of hope, faded but not yet gone. In Julian's mind, though he won't admit it, a spark of unease flares. Elise's words, though dismissed, have grazed a small corner of him. A question, a truth he's not ready to face. He closes his door, but her voice lingers, like a stray note echoing in his mind. The mansion sinks into silence, but it's a heavy silence, where two people bound by an unwanted marriage grapple to find meaning in it. Elise returns to the couch, picking up the book, but she doesn't read on. She gazes out the window, where Boston's city lights twinkle, wondering if time can bridge their divide or only deepen the cracks between them. One evening, after a lavish but hollow party, Julian drives through Boston's streets, his mind weary from wine and empty chatter. He pulls up outside Harbor Grill, a small diner he's never paid attention to before. Elise's job, his nominal wife's work, has never piqued his curiosity. But tonight, a strange urge draws him here. He wants to know her world, what ties her to this place. Julian pushes the door open, instantly feeling out of place amid the scent of home-cooked food and the low hum of diners' conversations. The space is warm, simple, with plain wooden tables and soft yellow lighting, a stark contrast to the elite clubs and upscale restaurants he knows. Elise stands at the far end of the room, in her server's uniform, taking an order from an elderly couple. She jots notes quickly, a professional smile on her lips. But when she looks up and sees Julian, her eyes widen in surprise. "What are you doing here?" she asks, her voice a mix of shock and suspicion, as if his presence defies explanation. Julian shrugs, trying to seem casual, though he's unsure himself why he came. "Just passing by," he replies, his tone light, but his eyes scan the diner, as if searching for a more convincing reason. Elise furrows her brow, clearly unconvinced, but she gestures to a small table by the window. "Sit down, I'll bring you something," she says, then returns to her work, her steps brisk yet graceful. Julian sits, feeling out of place among the unpretentious diners, a family laughing at the next table, an older man reading a newspaper with his coffee. He, in his expensive shirt and gleaming watch, seems alien here. Elise returns, bringing a plate of fragrant grilled chicken, creamy mashed potatoes, and fresh green beans. She sets it before him, her eyes flickering with curiosity. Julian picks up the fork, takes a bite of chicken, and is surprised by the flavor, simple but rich, authentic, unlike the elaborate dishes he's accustomed to. "Not bad," he says, his voice carrying genuine surprise. Elise smiles, a small but warm smile. "Not caviar, but good enough," she replies, her tone lightly teasing, as if testing his reaction. Julian looks at her, truly noticing her for the first time, not as part of an imposed marriage, but as a person. He sees the quiet strength in her movements, her interactions with customers, her steadiness in this world. "You've been doing this a while, haven't you?" he asks, his voice low, free of its usual sarcasm. Elise nods, wiping her hands on her apron, her gaze sweeping the diner. "Honest work," she says, her voice even. "Pays the bills, meets all kinds of people. It gives me a place to belong." Her words are simple, but their sincerity silences Julian. He chews slowly, each bite drawing him into Elise's world. Not lavish, not glamorous, but built on effort and real meaning. As he leaves, Julian stands, adjusting his jacket. He glances back at Elise, busy at another table. "Thanks for the food," he says, his voice low but sincere, a rarity for him. Elise looks up, offering a tired smile, as if accustomed to long days. "No problem," she replies, then returns to her work, not holding him back. Julian steps outside, Boston's cool night air enveloping him. He pauses by his expensive car, but this time, he doesn't rush to get in. He looks back at Harbor Grill through the glass, its yellow light spilling out, and Elise's figure moving among the tables. That night, Julian doesn't sleep. He lies in bed, eyes fixed on the ceiling, his mind drifting to Elise, to the diner, to the unassuming customers and the plate of grilled chicken. He thinks of his own life, the parties, the supercars, the emptiness he once thought was the pinnacle. Elise's words, about honest work, about a place to belong, echo in him. A bold, almost reckless idea sparks in his mind. He'll work at Harbor Grill. The thought, still unformed, makes his heart race, as if he's glimpsed a new path, a chance to understand not just Elise, but himself. On his first day at Harbor Grill, Julian Langley looks like a man adrift in his own world. He clumsily clears tables, porcelain plates clattering loudly, drawing stares from diners. Sweat beads on his forehead, soaking the dress shirt he's never worn for manual work. Other staff eye him skeptically, a rich guy, with an expensive watch and an air of not belonging, playing at being a worker. They whisper behind the counter, but Elise, with her calm, authoritative voice, vouches for him. "Give him a chance," she says, and they agree, though unconvinced. Julian struggles with every task, from carrying heavy trays to wiping tables without streaks. But he doesn't quit, despite trembling hands and aching feet. By day's end, he collapses onto a wooden chair in the diner's corner, exhausted, breathing heavily. Elise approaches, handing him a cold water bottle, droplets glinting under the light. "You survived," she says, her tone lightly teasing but not unkind. Julian manages a weak smile, wiping sweat from his brow. "I'll get the hang of it," he replies, his voice hoarse but tinged with determination. Over the following weeks, Julian adapts to Harbor Grill's relentless pace. He learns to carry plates without spilling, to keep up with orders during rush hours, and to work alongside those who once eyed him warily. The staff, from cooks to dishwashers, begin to accept him, no longer whispering behind his back. They see he's not just a rich man dabbling in a stunt, he's genuinely trying. Elise notices the change, too. Julian sheds the arrogance that once cloaked him. He starts listening, learning from those around him, even joking with co-workers while cleaning up after shifts. One afternoon, as they close the diner, sunset streams through the windows, casting an orange glow across the floor. Elise turns to Julian, who's wiping the counter with unexpected focus. "You're doing better than I expected," she says, her voice even, not overly warm, but sincere. Julian pauses, raising an eyebrow, a faint smile playing on his lips. "A compliment?" he asks, his tone lightly teasing. Elise gives a small laugh, shaking her head. "An observation," she replies, turning away, but the smile lingers on her lips. In the quiet moment of the empty diner, with only the soft hum of the ceiling fan, Julian looks at Elise, truly sees her. He notices the quiet strength in her work, the way she treats everyone with unassuming respect. He recognizes her resilience, a woman who doesn't need him, doesn't need the luxury or power he once thought defined everything. Elise, in her simple apron and sharp gaze, becomes captivating in a way he never noticed before. He starts thinking of her more, not just as someone forced into this marriage, but as an individual with her own world, a world he's slowly beginning to explore. One evening, as they share dinner in the mansion, the air feels less tense than in months past. Elise slices her meat, her focus steady, while Julian watches her intently, longer than usual. She notices his gaze, sets her fork down, and raises an eyebrow. "What are you staring at?" she asks, her tone tinged with suspicion, but not harsh. Julian blinks, as if snapped back to reality, then takes a deep breath, weighing each word. "Just thinking about us," he says, his voice low, carrying a rare sincerity. Elise pauses, her eyes cautious, as if searching for the truth behind his words. "Us?" she repeats, her voice soft but sharp, like a test. Julian nods, his gaze unwavering. "I'm starting to care about you," he admits. The confession simple, yet heavy with the weight of a turning point. Elise softens, but wariness lingers in her eyes. She tilts her head, considering, then replies, "Trying is a good start, Julian, but it takes more than words." She says no more, but her words leave a mark on Julian. He looks at her, the dining room light casting a glow on her face, and for the first time, he feels a connection, fragile, undefined, but real. Elise picks up her fork, resuming her meal, but the corner of her mouth lifts slightly, as if she too senses something shifting, though a long road still lies ahead for them both. One evening, after a long shift at Harbor Grill, Elise sits beside Julian on the mansion's living room couch, soft lamplight illuminating her face. She trembles, her hands clenched, as if wrestling with a secret too heavy to bear. "There's something you need to know," she says, her voice quivering. Julian frowns, his gaze shifting from indifference to curiosity. Elise takes a deep breath, summoning all her courage. "I didn't marry you just for the money," she confesses, her voice breaking. "I wanted revenge on your father. He destroyed my family, drove my father to suicide." Julian pales, his body stiffening. He leaps to his feet, eyes wide with shock and hurt. "Revenge?" he repeats, his voice choked. Elise sobs, tears streaming down her cheeks. "That was the plan at first," she says. "But I've changed. I love you, Julian." Julian paces the room, hands clenched, betrayal and pain surging like waves. "How can I trust you?" he asks, his voice icy, each word a sharp cut. Elise wipes her tears, her eyes resolute despite the pain. "I don't expect forgiveness now," she says, "but I'll prove it." Julian doesn't respond. He turns away, leaving the room, needing space to grapple with the storm inside. In the days that follow, he avoids Elise, locking himself in his study or leaving the house early. His mind reels with questions about her, about his father, about their marriage, but the thought of losing Elise pierces his heart, a pain he can't dismiss. A week later, Elise vanishes. Julian returns to an empty mansion, no trace of her. Panic grips him. He calls her phone, searches everywhere, from Harbor Grill to places she's mentioned, but finds no clues. Finally, he calls Victor, his father, who arrives immediately. Victor, with a pensive gaze, checks his phone and says, "She's in Savannah." Without another word, they drive through the night, headlights streaking past like fleeting stars. At a small house on Savannah's outskirts, Elise opens the door, her face weary, her eyes fragile but unsurprised. Julian steps inside, his heart pounding, as if every pent-up emotion is erupting. "I love you," he says, his voice firm, though trembling slightly. "We can try again." Elise sobs, clutching his hand as if afraid he'll vanish. He pulls her close, feeling her warmth, a silent promise that they'll overcome. Victor, standing behind, steps forward, his voice low and earnest. "Elise, I'm sorry for what I did to your family," he says, his eyes, for the first time, carrying genuine remorse. Elise nods, tears still falling, but her gaze softens, as if a painful chapter has closed. She says nothing, but that nod is enough, a wordless forgiveness, a step toward moving forward. Julian and Elise return to Boston, determined to rebuild from scratch. Julian, in a surprising move, relinquishes most of his inheritance, choosing a simpler life with Elise. They move to a smaller home, free of opulence, but rich with meaning. One evening, on their new porch, Julian and Elise sit side by side, watching a fiery sunset blaze across the horizon. The light bathes them in a warm, golden glow, a reminder of the journey they've traveled. "We've come a long way," Julian says, his arm around Elise, his voice tinged with wonder and gratitude. Elise leans into his shoulder, smiling, her eyes shining. "Yes," she replies, her voice soft. "And I'm glad for it." They sit there, in comfortable silence, feeling the bond they've forged from the fragments of their past. Leave a comment. If you believe a forced act can lead to true love, hit like, subscribe to 30 Millionaire Stories, and share who changed your life. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.